The moment my father called Isabella a charity case right there at the dinner table, I knew this engagement celebration was about to become something none of us would ever forget. She just smiled that mysterious smile of hers, the one I'd fallen in love with 2 years ago, and quietly folded her napkin. What my family didn't know was that they were sitting in her restaurant, insulting the woman who could have them thrown out with a single word. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Let me start from the beginning because you need to understand how perfectly orchestrated this disaster was. I'm Michael Patterson. I'm 29 years old and I work in corporate finance downtown. It's nothing glamorous, just pushing numbers around spreadsheets for clients who have more money than they know what to do. With my family has always been comfortable, not wealthy, but comfortable enough to think they're better than most people. My mother, Patricia, runs a small interior design business that caters to the kind of clients who use words like curated and bespoke unironically. My father, Richard, manages a mid-size insurance agency and has never met a conversation he couldn't turn into a lecture about making smart financial decisions. My sister Jessica works in marketing for a tech startup and somehow thinks that makes her an expert on everyone else's life choices. Isabella Martinez and I met at a coffee shop on Elm Street 2 years ago. She was reading a book on restaurant management, making notes in the margins with this tiny, precise handwriting. I was nursing my third espresso of the day, trying to work up the courage to finish a presentation that was due in 4 hours. Looked up, caught me staring, and instead of being annoyed, she smiled and asked if I needed help with whatever was making me look so stressed. 3 hours later, we were still talking. She told me she worked in the restaurant industry, managing operations for a small chain. I told her about my job, my family, my complete lack of cooking skills. She laughed at my jokes, listened when I complained about work, and somehow made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. By the time we left, I already knew I wanted to see her again. What I didn't know was that Isabella had bigger plans than just managing someone else's restaurants. She'd been saving for years, working 16-hour days, living in a studio apartment barely bigger than my office cubicle, also she could buy her own place. She never complained about the long hours or the exhaustion. She just worked, saved, and planned. The Riverside Bistro had been struggling for months when Isabella made her offer. The previous owner was drowning in debt, couldn't keep staff, and had alienated half the neighborhood with inconsistent service and overpriced mediocre food. Isabella saw potential where everyone else saw a lost cause. She spent her entire savings account, took out loans that would have terrified me, and bought the place 6 months ago. She never told me she was the owner. For 6 months, whenever I asked about work, she'd say things were going well at the restaurant. When I suggested we eat there sometime, she'd deflect, saying she spent too much time there already and wanted to go somewhere else when we were together. I thought she was just being modest about her management role. I had no idea she was being secretive about owning the entire operation. The transformation she pulled off was incredible. Within 2 months, she'd hired new staff, redesigned the menu, and somehow convinced the neighborhood that the Riverside Bistro was worth another chance. By month 4, they were booking reservations 3 weeks out. The place became the kind of restaurant where proposals happened, where families celebrated anniversaries, where first dates turned into relationships. I proposed to Isabella 3 weeks ago on the little bridge behind her apartment building. Nothing fancy, just the two of us and a ring I'd been carrying around for a month, waiting for the right moment. She said yes before I even finished asking the question. And for exactly 10 seconds, I thought the hard part was over. Then I had to tell my family. The conversation didn't go well. My mother wanted to know what Isabella did for work. When I said, she worked in restaurant management, my father immediately launched into a speech about the instability of the service industry. Jessica asked where Isabella went to college, what her parents did, whether she had any real career ambitions beyond just working in restaurants. I tried to defend her, but every answer seemed to make things worse. When I mentioned that Isabella had grown up in a working-class family, my mother got that look she gets when she's trying to be diplomatic about something she finds distasteful. When I said Isabella was incredibly smart and hardworking, my father asked if she had any concrete plans for advancing her career or if she was content to stay at that level permanently. The engagement dinner was my mother's idea. Should meet her properly, she said. Somewhere nice where we can all talk and get to know each other better. She chose the Riverside Bistro, which she'd been reading about in the local food magazine. It's supposed to be excellent, she told me over the phone. It'll be a good test to see how Isabella handles herself in a nice restaurant. I should have seen the trap being set. My family had decided Isabella wasn't good enough for me before. They'd even met her and they were planning to prove it. The night of the dinner, Isabella was quieter than usual. She wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy, but she looked beautiful. As we walked up to the restaurant, she paused for just a moment, looking at the sign above the door with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You okay?" I asked. "Perfect," she said, but there was something in her voice, something I'd never heard before. Anticipation, maybe, or preparation. My family was already seated when we arrived. My mother had chosen a table in the center of the dining room, the kind of spot where everyone could see and be seen. She stood up when she saw us coming, extending her hand to Isabella with that smile she uses for clients she's trying to impress but doesn't actually like. "You must be Isabella," my mother said, looking her up and down in a way that was supposed to seem casual, but felt like an inspection. "We've heard so much about you." Isabella shook her hand, greeted my father and sister politely, and sat down in the chair I pulled out for her. The waiter came over immediately, addressing Isabella by name and asking if she'd like her usual wine. "You come here often?" Jessica asked, and there was something pointed in the question, like she was trying to figure out if Isabella could actually afford to eat at a place like this regularly. "Sometimes," Isabella said simply. The interrogation started before we'd even ordered appetizers. My mother wanted to know about Isabella's family, her background, her education. Isabella answered every question politely, never defensive, never apologetic. But I could see my family's expressions getting more and more smug with each response. When Isabella mentioned that her father worked construction and her mother cleaned houses, my father nodded in that way. That means he thinks he understands everything about someone's character based on their parents' jobs. When she said she'd worked her way through community college while managing restaurants, Jessica made a little sound that might have been sympathy, but felt more like pity. The real attack came during the main course. My mother, emboldened by 2 glasses of wine and what she clearly thought was the moral high ground, leaned forward and smiled her most condescending smile. "Isabella, dear," she said, "I hope you understand that we're just concerned about Michael's future. He has so much potential, and we want to make sure he's with someone who can match his ambitions." Isabella set down her fork and looked directly at my mother. "What kind of ambitions are you worried I can't match?" "Well," my mother said, glancing at my father for support, "Michael has a career in finance. He's building something substantial. We just want to make sure his partner brings the same level of stability to the relationship." "Stability?" Isabella repeated, like she was testing the word. What Patricia means, my father jumped in, is that Michael needs someone who understands the importance of financial security, building wealth, of making smart long-term decisions. Restaurant work is fine for now, but what about 5 years? From now, 10 years? Are you planning to manage other people's restaurants forever? That's when Jessica delivered the killing blow. "Look, Isabella, we're not trying to be mean," she said, using that tone people use when they're absolutely trying to be mean. "But Michael deserves someone who can be a real partner in building a life together, someone who brings something to the table besides just ... good intentions." The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella looked around the table at each of them, then at me. I was furious, embarrassed, and completely unprepared for what happened next. Isabella smiled. That smile wasn't what I expected. It wasn't hurt or angry or even surprised. It was the smile of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment, who'd known it was coming and had prepared for it. "You're absolutely right, Jessica," Isabella said, her voice perfectly calm. "Michael does deserve a partner who brings something to the table." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, scrolling through something quickly. "Actually, let me show you what I bring to the table." My mother leaned forward, probably expecting to see a resume or maybe some pathetic attempt to prove Isabella's worth through her savings account or credit score? Jessica smirked, clearly thinking she'd won some kind of victory. Isabella turned her phone around, showing them a photo. It was a certificate, official looking, with the state seal at the top. "This is the business license for the Riverside Bistro," Isabella said casually. "You'll notice the owner's name at the bottom." The smirk disappeared from Jessica's face. My mother's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. My father leaned forward, squinting at the phone screen, like he was trying to read fine print on a contract. "Isabella Martinez," she continued, "that's me. The woman you've been lecturing about financial stability for the past hour." The silence was so complete I could hear the kitchen staff working in the back, soft clink of dishes being prepared, the hum of the refrigeration units. Around us, other diners continued their conversations, completely unaware that my family's world was imploding at table 7. "You own this place?" my father asked, and his voice had gone very quiet. "I do." Isabella slipped her phone back into her purse. "Bought it 6 months ago. Turn it around, build it into what you see tonight. The reservation you made, that was with my hostess? The wine you complimented? I selected every bottle on our list. The food you've been enjoying? I hired the chef. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." My mother looked around the restaurant like she was seeing it for the first time. Elegant lighting, the carefully arranged flowers on each table, the soft jazz playing in the background, the steady stream of satisfied customers. This wasn't just any restaurant. This was a successful business, the kind of place that probably generated more revenue in a month than my father's insurance agency did in a quarter. The reviews in the food magazine, my mother said slowly, ones that called this place a hidden gem in destination dining. They were reviewing my restaurant, Isabella confirmed. My menu, my staff, my vision for what this place could become. Jessica was staring at Isabella like she'd just watched her perform actual magic. "But you said you worked in restaurant management?" "I do manage a restaurant," Isabella replied. "Mine." The waiter appeared at our table then, a young man with an easy smile, who clearly knew Isabella well. "Everything is tasting good tonight. Ms. Martinez, can I get you anything else?" "We're fine, David, thank you." Isabella's voice was warm when she spoke to him, completely different from the controlled tone she'd been using with my family. "How's the new schedule working out for you?" "Perfect, actually. Having Sundays off has been amazing. My girlfriend and I can finally go to her family dinners." He grinned. "I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your evening." After he left, Isabella turned back to my family. "David's a college student. I adjusted all my staff schedules so the ones in school could have time for their families and their studies. Funny thing about treating people well, they work harder, stay longer, and take pride in what they do." My father was doing mental calculations. I could practically see the gears turning in his head. The same look he got when he was trying to figure out insurance premiums or investment returns. A restaurant like this, in this location, with these kind of reviews, is worth approximately $1.2 million, Isabella finished. "I bought it for $800,000 when the previous owner was desperate to sell. The renovations cost another $200,000. Current monthly revenue is running about $180,000, the profit margin of around 15% after all expenses. The numbers hit my family like cold water. My mother's interior design business was successful, but she'd never seen numbers like that. Jessica's tech startup salary was good, but not owns $1 million business good. My father spent his days helping other people protect their assets, but he'd never built anything like what Isabella had created." "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked. And for the first time all evening, she sounded genuinely confused instead of condescending. "Tell you what exactly?" Isabella's tone remained perfectly level. "That I own a successful business? That? I employ 15 people and provide them with health insurance and paid time off. That I've built something that brings joy to thousands of customers every year?" She paused, taking a sip of her wine before continuing. "When would I have mentioned that? When you were questioning my stability? When you were worried about my ambitions? When you were explaining to me what Michael deserves in a partner?" "We're just trying to look out for him," Jessica said. But the defensive edge in her voice made it clear she knew how weak that sounded now. "Were you?" Isabella asked, "because it seemed like you were trying to convince him that I wasn't good enough? That someone from my background, with my education, doing my kind of work, couldn't possibly be worthy of your son and brother." Mother flinched. "You never said you didn't have to say it directly." Isabella's voice was getting sharper now, the careful control starting to crack. "Said it with every question about my family's jobs, every comment about stability, every doubt about whether I had real career ambitions. You said it when you chose this restaurant specifically to see how I'd handle myself in a nice place." The accusation hung in the air. My mother's face went red. She had chosen this place as a test, and now the test had backfired spectacularly. "The irony," Isabella continued, "is that you brought me to my own restaurant to prove I didn't belong in places like this. You wanted to watch me struggle with the menu, maybe mispronounce something, act uncomfortable around the staff, prove that I was out of my league. Instead, you watched the staff treat me like family, watched me navigate the wine list like I wrote it, watched me be completely at home in what you thought was foreign territory." She was right, and we all knew it. The way my mother had insisted on this particular restaurant, the way she'd watched Isabella's every move during dinner, the way she'd seemed almost disappointed when Isabella handled everything perfectly, it had all been a setup. "I need to know something," Isabella said, looking directly at me for the first time since the conversation started. "Did you know? Your mother suggested this place? Did you know what she was trying to do?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest, because the truth was, I had suspected. I'd known my mother well enough to recognize the signs, but I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. I'd told myself she was just trying to be nice, trying to get to know Isabella better. I wondered, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper, but I hoped I was wrong. Isabella nodded slowly, like my answer confirmed something she'd already suspected. And when they started questioning my background, my education, my career prospects, when they started treating me like I was trying to trap you into marriage for your money, you said nothing. She was right again. I'd sat there, getting angry but staying silent, letting my family tear down the woman I loved while I waited for the right moment to defend her. Except that moment had never come, and now Isabella was defending herself. "Was waiting for you to stand up for me," she said quietly. "Waiting for you to tell them that who my parents are doesn't matter, that where I went to school doesn't define me, that the work I do has value regardless of their opinions about the service industry." The worst part was that she was absolutely right. I should have shut down their interrogation the moment it started. Should have told them that Isabella was incredible, that she worked harder than anyone I knew, that she'd built something amazing through pure determination and intelligence. Instead, I'd sat there like a coward, letting them attack her while I tried to figure out how to navigate between the people I loved. "I'm sorry," I said, but the words felt pathetically inadequate. Isabella stood up from the table, smoothing down her dress. "Marcus," she called to a man in a server's uniform who was passing by. "Could you please bring the check for table 7? "Of course, Ms. Martinez." He disappeared toward the register. "Wait," my father said quickly. "Isabella, we owe you an apology. We misjudged you completely." "You did," she agreed. "Not because I own this restaurant. Misjudged me because you decided who I was before you met me, based on assumptions about my background and my work. The fact that I own a successful business doesn't change the fact that you would have treated me the same way if I was just a manager, or a server, or anything else you consider beneath your son." Marcus returned with the leather check folder. Placing it discreetly on the table, Isabella picked it up before anyone else could reach for it. "This meal is in the house," she said. "Consider it a wedding gift from an unworthy fiancé." The leather check folder sat on the table like a grenade. With the pin pulled, my family stared at it, then at Isabella, then at each other, clearly trying to process what had just happened. "You don't need to do that," my mother said quickly. "Can pay for our own dinner." "I'm sure you can," Isabella replied. "But this is my restaurant, and I decide who pays what. Tonight, you're my guests." There was something about the way she said guests that made it clear we weren't welcome ones. My father cleared his throat, his insurance salesman instincts kicking in. This was damage control time, the moment when he usually found a way to turn a disaster into an opportunity. "Isabella, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. We clearly underestimated you, and we'd like the chance to make that right." "Would you make it right?" Isabella asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "My father said, warming to his theme. "Now that we know what kind of businesswoman you are, we'd love to be involved. I have connections in the insurance industry and could probably get you better rates on your business policies. Patricia has an eye for design. Maybe she could help with future renovations. Jessica understands marketing, social media, all that digital stuff that drives customers these days." I watched Isabella's face as my father spoke. Her expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. "So now that you know I'm successful," she said slowly, "you want to be part of that success?" "We want to be family," my mother corrected. "We want to support you and Michael as you build your life together." "Where was that support an hour ago?" Isabella asked. "When you thought I was just a restaurant manager trying to trap your son." "When were you worried about my concrete plans for advancing my career?" "When you were explaining to me what Michael deserves in a partner?" Jessica leaned forward, her marketing background apparent in the way she tried to reframe the conversation. "Look, we made assumptions. That was wrong. But families make mistakes, right? The important thing is that we're willing to acknowledge those mistakes and move forward." "Move forward how?" Isabella's voice was getting dangerously quiet. "By pretending the last 2 hours didn't happen? By acting like your opinion of me changed because I have money, instead of because you realized you were wrong about who I am as a person?" The restaurant hummed around us. Other diners laughed at their tables, couples shared desserts, and families celebrated birthdays. Normal people, having normal evenings, completely unaware that my entire world was crumbling at table 7. Da-da-da-da-da. "Truth is," Isabella continued, "none of you would have changed your minds if I was just a manager making $40,000 a year. If I was a server putting herself through school, or a hostess trying to save up for her own place someday, you'd still think I wasn't good enough for Michael. The only thing that changed your opinion was learning that I have assets you might want access to." She stood up again, and this time I knew she was leaving. "Marcus," she called out. The same server appeared instantly. "Yes, Ms. Martinez. Could you please escort my guests to the exit? And make sure they understand that they're welcome to return as paying customers, but any future reservations should be made through our normal booking system." The dismissal was absolute, not just from the table, but from her life. "Isabella." "Wait," I said, finally finding my voice. "Don't do this." She turned to look at me, and the sadness in her eyes was worse than anger would have been. "Do what, Michael? Stand up for myself? Refuse to accept being treated like dirt by people who are supposed to love you? Set boundaries with people who only respect me now that they know my net worth?" "They're my family," I said, hating how weak it sounded. "I know they are, and I'm supposed to be your fiancé. But you sat there for 2 hours and let them tear me apart without saying a word. You let them question my character, my motives, my worth as a human being, and you said nothing." "I didn't know how to handle it," I admitted. "You didn't know how to handle it?" Her voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. "Michael, they called me for a charity case. They implied I was a gold digger trying to trap you into marriage. They suggested I wasn't educated enough, ambitious enough, good enough to be with you. And you didn't know how to handle it?" She was right, and everyone at the table knew it. I'd failed her completely. "Here's how you handle it, Isabella," said, her voice dropping back to that dangerous quiet. "You say that's my fiancée you're talking about? I won't sit here and listen to you disrespect her. You say Isabella is an incredible woman who I'm lucky to be with. Regardless of what she does for work, you say if you can't treat the person I love with basic human decency, then we're done here." Each sentence hit like a slap. Those were exactly the words I should have said, the defense she deserved and never gotten. "But you didn't say any of that," she continued. "You sat. They're trying to figure out how to keep everyone happy, how to manage the situation without taking a side. Well, Michael, sometimes you have to take a side. Sometimes you have to choose between enabling bad behavior and protecting the people you claim to love." My mother tried one more time. "Isabella, dear, we know we handled this badly, but we're Michael's family. We're going to be in his life forever. Don't you think it would be better for everyone if we could find a way to work this out?" Isabella turned to face my mother directly. Mrs. Patterson, let me ask you something. If Michael brought home a woman who owned 3 restaurants, had an MBA from Wharton, and came from a family of doctors and lawyers, but she spent the evening insulting you, questioning your intelligence, and suggesting you weren't good enough. For your own son, would you want to work it out with her? My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. That's what I thought, Isabella said. Respect isn't something you negotiate or work toward, something you give and receive, or you don't. And I've learned tonight that your family only gives respect to people they think can benefit them financially. She walked over to where I was sitting and looked down at me. Michael, I love you. I've loved you for 2 years, and I thought we were building something real together. But I can't marry someone who won't defend me to his own family. I can't spend the rest of my life wondering if you'll stand up for me when it matters, or if you'll just sit there trying to keep the peace while people I'm supposed to love treat me like garbage. Isabella, please, I said, reaching for her hand. Give me another chance, I'll do better. She didn't pull her hand away, but she didn't squeeze back either. Michael, this wasn't a test I set up for you. This was your family attacking me, and you choosing to let it happen? That tells me everything I need to know about where your priorities are. My priorities are with you, I said desperately. No, they're not. Your priorities are avoiding conflict. You'd rather let me get hurt than risk upsetting your family. That's not the foundation for a marriage. She slipped the engagement ring off her finger and placed it gently on the table in front of me. The diamond caught the light from the restaurant's carefully placed fixtures, sparkling like a tiny star in the wreckage of everything I'd thought I wanted. I'm sorry it ended this way, she said quietly. I really hoped they'd surprise me. I hoped that maybe I was wrong about them, that they'd see past their prejudices and get to know me as a person. I even hoped that you'd find your backbone and defend the woman you supposedly want to spend your life with. Jessica made one last attempt at salvage. Isabella, you're making a huge mistake. You're throwing away a good relationship because of one bad evening? Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jessica, this wasn't one bad evening.
Ow.
This was your family showing me exactly who they are when they think they have the upper hand. This was 2 hours of them trying to convince Michael that I'm not worthy of him, followed by an immediate about-face when they realized I have money. This was Michael proving that he'll choose the path of least resistance over protecting the person he claims to love. She picked up her purse and looked at each of them one final time. Marcus will show you out. Your parking is validated at the garage next door. Thank you for an illuminating evening. Isabella, my father called after her as she started to walk away. What about the restaurant? We could still help you grow the business, bring in new customers, expand your operations. She stopped walking and turned back slowly. Mr. Patterson, did you seriously just ask me about business opportunities 30 seconds after I broke off? My engagement to your son because your family spent the evening trying to destroy my self-worth? My father had the grace to look embarrassed. Let me be very clear about something, Isabella continued. I built this restaurant from nothing. I saved every penny for 8 years, worked 16-hour days, sacrificed social life and sleep and vacations, all so I could create something that was entirely mine. I turned a failing business into a success story that gets written up in magazines. I did all of that without your help, without your connections, without your approval or support, or investment. She paused, looking around the dining room at the customers enjoying their meals, the staff moving efficiently between tables, the entire operation running smoothly under her leadership. I don't need your insurance contacts or your design ideas, or your marketing expertise. What I needed was for you to treat me like a human being worth knowing, regardless of my bank account. What I needed was for your son to love me enough to defend me when you couldn't manage basic courtesy. What I needed was to be accepted into a family, not auditioned for the role of appropriate daughter-in-law. Marcus appeared at the table with 2 other staff members, clearly prepared to escort us out if necessary. The reality is that you're not upset because I'm leaving Michael, Isabella said. You're upset because you just realize you can't benefit from our relationship. You're not worried about his happiness. You're worried about losing access to mine. She was absolutely right, and the truth of it was written all over their faces. Michael, Isabella said, looking at me one last time, you're a good man with a good heart, but you're not ready to be a husband. Maybe someday you'll learn to put your partner first, to stand up for what's right even when it's uncomfortable. When that day comes, you'll find someone who deserves that version of you." She nodded to Marcus, who stepped forward politely but firmly. "If you could please follow me," he said to my family. "Ms. Martinez has other matters to attend to this." Evening, we stood up slowly, the weight of what had just happened settling over all of us. As we walked toward the exit, I could hear Isabella in the kitchen, talking to her staff about tomorrow's prep, already moving on with her life, while mine fell apart. At the door, I turned back for one last look. Through the kitchen window, I could see Isabella tying an apron around her waist, getting ready to help with the evening cleanup. She looked completely at home, surrounded by people who respected her, working in the space she'd created through sheer determination and intelligence, the space my family had tried to use as a weapon against her. Not knowing they were sitting in the middle of her greatest achievement. 6 months later, I drove past the Riverside Bistro, sometimes on my way home from work. There's always a line outside, couples waiting for tables, families celebrating special occasions. Isabella expanded the patio and hired more staff. I heard from a mutual friend that she's been featured in 3 different food magazines and is considering opening a second location. I never went back inside. What would be the point? I had my chance to be part of something beautiful, to support someone extraordinary, to build a life with a woman who turned dreams into reality through pure hard work and vision. Instead, I chose to protect people who only cared about me when it was convenient, who only respected others when it benefited. Them who taught me that love comes with conditions and worth is measured in dollar signs. Isabella was right about everything. She deserves someone who would defend her, who would see her value regardless of her bank account, who would choose her over the comfort of family approval. She deserves someone brave enough to stand up for what was right, even when it meant disappointing people they loved. She deserved better than me. Sometimes I wonder if my family learned anything from that night. My mother still runs her design business. My father still sells insurance. Jessica still works in marketing. They all ask about my dating life now and then. But they've stopped offering to set me up with people they think would be appropriate. Maybe they realize that their judgment isn't as reliable as they thought. Maybe they learned that success and worth come in forms they hadn't considered. Maybe they understand now that respect isn't negotiable, that love doesn't come with prerequisites, that character matters more than connections. Or maybe they just learned to keep their opinions to themselves, till they're sure they won't backfire spectacularly. Either way, I lost the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too afraid to risk disappointing people who had already disappointed me. Isabella built an empire while I sat at the table, trying to keep everyone happy. She knew her worth while I let others question it. The woman, who they called Unworthy, owned the ground they were standing on, employed the people serving them, and created the atmosphere they were enjoying. The charity case they worried about turned out to be more successful than any of us. The girl from the wrong side of town, with the wrong education and the wrong family background, had built something beautiful, something lasting, something entirely her own. And I let her walk away because I was too much of a coward to tell my family that they were wrong about everything that mattered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.